What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today we're going to be talking about the Formula 1 Chinese Grand Prix. Specifically, a couple of things that happened within that one race, because otherwise it was surprisingly chalk across the board. I'm not going to lie, I ended up watching the whole race in the middle of the night, and I just kind of was like, you know, there's no shocking results here, but I feel strangely satisfied by the race that I just watched. So, it wasn't a bad race, it was actually a pretty good race. But just not that many interesting things other than the actual on-track action itself in terms of some of the passing and overtakes that we saw, which well, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that. So after the season opener in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, I think a lot of us, myself included, were kind of on the old, did we just punch a ticket back to 2004 and 2005 with these cars? Because it seems like nobody's gonna pass. Actually, there was surprisingly decent amounts of actual, on-track racing for a Formula 1 race. Not necessarily a lot of prolonged, protracted wheel-to-wheel battles. Definitely a lot of dive bombs for the most part, but that's just going to be how it is in these types of cars. As fast as they are, as fast as they go through the corners. I guess there's really not any other way to pass, and it certainly is spectacular and exciting when it finally does go down. While Shanghai is definitely more typical for the F1 calendar circuit than Melbourne was, I'm just not entirely sure. It seemed like a lot of the passes just kind of ended up happening out of the blue, with cars just being a little bit out of place in the running order because of the way the strategy there in the early portion of the race with the virtual safety car and then the safety car sort of jumbled up the field a little bit. So it still remains to be seen in a more standard, more straight up fight. I mean, we all know that the Ferrari is faster than the Red Bull, so it's not surprising that Vettel was able to pass both of the Red Bulls in pretty spectacular fashions, because, well, if the car is faster, then, well, even if he's stuck behind him, then it's not going to necessarily still mean that he's disadvantaged as much if he was racing, for example, one of the Mercedes. I'm also thinking that Shanghai might just happen to be one of those oddities where it just kind of worked out right, because it seemed like a lot of the passes into turn 6 were kind of created out of, I think it's turn 3, the tight left-hander after the exceptionally long right-hander to start the lap. But there's kind of two different lines through there, and maybe having just that difference in the lines between the left-right sweeper into turn 6 just kind of ends up being that it offsets the lines just enough that it's possible to stay in there and be able to make that dive bomb pass around the outside or up the inside into turn 6, which historically has been a pretty solid passing zone, even though you look at it on the track map and compared to certain other portions, like for example the hairpin, obviously at Shanghai, I mean, it's a really good passing opportunity, even though it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb on the track map. But either way, it was definitely good to see some really exciting passes, really fantastic overtakes. So again, it was pretty satisfying to watch race. Besides the overtaking, one of the other things I'd like to talk about would be Kimi Räikkönen and Sebastian Vettel. Whether or not Vettel should have been pushed forward ahead of Kimi there when he was behind him sort of in the early stages of the race, due to the way the strategies had cycled through, thanks to the virtual safety car and the safety car. A lot of people are today piling on Ferrari and being all like, well, you should have got Vettel through, you should have jumped on the horn and been like, hey Kimi, Sebastian is faster than you, can you confirm, gone through that. But at the same time, if you do that, then the other side, the Ferrari haters, just absolutely crush them. So it's just one of those things, especially in Ferrari's case, where team orders for them are just never good. One side or the other is always going to crush them. And yes, it would have been beneficial for Ferrari and Ferrari's race if Vettel would have gotten through quicker. But at the same time, when do you make that call to get, Kimi out of the way? How aggressive are you on the horn? And, again, yeah, they should have gotten him out of the way, because that's the race and that's what they should run. But at the same time, then you also, draw the ire of everybody else who's just kind of waiting to begin their hate mongering. And I'll also say this, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it really made too much of a difference, because Hamilton pretty much had the race from the get-go and had the whole race in command basically. The Ferrari might have the edge in race pace, however, I don't think it was going to be great enough that even if Vettel did get by 2 or 3 or 4 laps earlier, that it would have actually mattered much. And at the end of the day, Hamilton won the race by 8 seconds, and he pretty much answered Vettel's push there towards the end stages of the race and basically stalled that out, and that was that. So I don't think, even regarding how fast Raikkonen moved out of the way for Vettel, that it would have actually ended up mattering in terms of the results. And then the other big thing in the race, well, Max Verstappen in general. That kid has incredible amounts of talent, and it is so fun to watch him. Honestly, I'm very much in the middle of no man's land when it comes to teams and drivers in Formula One. I don't have any particular allegiances anymore, but watching that guy reminds me of why I started watching Formula One and really got into it back in the early 2000s with Juan Pablo Montoya. Just that crazy guy that was going to pull that crazy move that was basically just going to be like, oh, he just disrespected your whole family. Oh, that type of thing. And he basically did that carving up the field. Although at the same time also comes the, are you brain dead moments, such as complaining about being stuck behind a lapped car that is 1.5 seconds up the road. And look, I get it. I think we all understand it. Of course he's going to jump on the radio and say that Grosjean was holding him up, even though he was 1.5 seconds up the road and was basically holding that gap consistently. I mean, he had his teammate right behind him, and he wants to go ahead and hold his position, so he's going to say, hey, get this guy out of my way, please. And if you just so happen to slot him in between the two of us, that'd be perfectly fine. That's what it is. And basically every driver in Formula One is going to complain about that, but, it does become a little excessive. However, it's just the way the cookie crumbles, and that's that. I don't think he was being held up at all. I think it is much more a case that, they basically, Red Bull basically pitted Verstappen with like 26 laps to go on the super softs, which he had done that many laps in the first stint with the yellow flag in there. So basically it's going to work out roughly the same probably in terms of tire wear, even though he's going to be running a lighter car at the end of the race. So I think at that point his tires were basically gone, and that's why he ended up slipping back and why he wasn't able to relatively easily catch up to Grosjean and pass him. Because I think if he would have caught up to Grosjean, he would have just moved out of the way, because he's a lap down. There's a race going on and you ain't in it, and that's basically that. So I think he's just complaining for the sake of complaining to Formula One drivers going to be Formula One drivers. Oh, and the other thing, the McLaren. The McLaren saga with Honda. Once again, second race in a row, Fernando Alonso running up there in the points, looking like he could have scored points, only to come up short thanks to reliability or damage issues. In Melbourne, it was apparently some damage suffered earlier on in the race that just ended up getting worse and worse and worse. And then he had that little maybe minor contact with one of the Force Indias in that corner, which eventually ended up putting him out of the race. They said that is a floor issue, so something under the car probably going wrong. And then in China, a drive shaft failure, which, these aren't even things that are just like hilarious, haha, Honda reliability sucks, haha. Alternatively, like just silly type of things that we expect. It's like the McLaren is actually running, in the hands of Fernando Alonso at least, relatively well, better than what you'd think. I mean, he was up there in the friggin' points, like legitimately, at China, a track with a 10-mile long straightaway. Like, this was actually happening. Only for that to happen. Like, that's not even, just a silly failure. That's just like one of those minor little failures, something, probably in Formula One terms, a $5 part going wrong. That's just a bummer. That is an absolute bummer. Maybe one of these days Fernando will get some points, because he certainly deserves it. He's doing a fantastic job out there. He's giving it the old college try, which is always great to see. But hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.